Hello.
Hi.
Welcome to Archaeologists Behaving Badly. This is episode
10.
10.
It's our third attempt at episode 10.
Embarrassing.
So sorry for the hiatus. We've had quite a time getting this episode out. Oh my God. Technical difficulties.
Too much drunkenness.
Yeah, taking antihistamines that were very drowsy and not okay, basically. But we're here and we're doing it now. We're doing it now. So this is weird burials.
It is.
Yes. Which is a bit of a fun topic because we love a weird burial.
We do.
Yeah. And there's so many.
There's a lot.
Yeah.
Who's going first?
Maybe I should go first this time.
All right.
Because last time when we tried, that didn't work so well. Because
Let's hope I can hold my wine better than she did.
Okay, so weird burials, there's like so many to choose from.
Yeah, it's very broad.
It's so broad. But I want to talk about Mongolia.
Okay.
Yeah. And we kind of touched on Mongolia. This was a while ago.
This is one of the very early episodes.
Yeah. So a Mongolian cemetery has been discovered in the Eurasian mountains.
Next card.
Let's just wait. Here, what did I do?
Rack did, just before we start, try and order her cards. And she was like, I hope they're in order. They're not in order.
Immediate fail. Immediate fail. Where am I? So, a Mongolian cemetery has been discovered in the Eurasian mountains. And due to the permafrost, it's actually melting away. So that's the reason why this cemetery was found in the Eurasian mountains. The cemetery is located high up in the, oh my God, this is going to be wrong, the Kovsgol Mountains, and is called Korik, also called the Great Taboo, which is a super cute name, I think.
The Great Taboo.
The Great Taboo, and is aptly located in Mongolia. It's been open to archaeologists since 1980s, where they were able to determine almost 1,400 burials.
Wow.
Through ultrasound techniques. So they weren't even like digging all of them up. They were just finding them through ultrasound, which I think is really cool. This is the area believed to be where Genghis Khan was buried, which you said is supposed to be pronounced Genghis Khan, from that super bad TV show that we watch.
Yes. And also
Blood and
from
Treasure.
my sister who did some volunteer work in Mongolia.
Oh,
and she was
cool.
like, actually, it's Genghis Khan.
Well, there you go. Genghis Khan. You heard it here potentially first.
Potentially second or third.
Because I'm pretty sure you actually did mention this in a previous episode, and you also said Genghis Khan. Anyway, the area is believed to be where Genghis Khan is buried, or at least they made an effort to make it out like he was buried there.
Okay.
Dating of the site suggests it was created pretty much at the very start of the Mongolian unification in 1206
Okay.
CE or AD. The same year when Genghis Khan proclaimed himself as ruler of the Mongols. So this whole area was the cemetery was kind of up and running just at that time.
Okay. Cool.
Which is pretty cool. In 2018 and 19, 11 individuals were discovered at Korik, which were elite burials, and they were in remarkably good condition due to the permafrost preserving them. So, that's the reason why they're so well preserved, is because it was in such high altitude, I guess, and it being really cold and freezing up there. These aristocrats were dressed in fine clothes, such as silks, and had some amazing grave goods, like gold ornaments, including Buddhas and dragons, which is really cool.
That would be a fun burial to find.
100%. And when there's treasure as well, it's even more fun. The researchers were particularly interested in finding out the lifestyle and diets of the elite, and looked at the proteins within the dental calculus of the individuals, which we talked about that before. It's I think we were talking about Ötzi, the Iceman, and like how they were really looking at his diet and like where he came from, and that was all from like the dental.
And I know people who have done that at, I can't remember the name of the site, but in Central America.
Oh, cool.
And that's actually what
They were looking for,
they were doing.
Cool.
Was looking at where these people grew up and stuff based on.
Yeah, based on their teeth. Yeah. Which is like such a random, out of all the things from a human body, you can actually get so much information from teeth. Like,
and they last longer than nearly anything else as well.
Yeah, 100%. So they found that these individuals drank a lot of milk from horses, sheep, goats, cows, and most notably yaks. Yaks are usually found in high altitudes.
I sort of forgot about the yak.
Yeah, I know, right?
As
Their
an animal
existence.
that they exist.
Yeah. And so they were like, you know, really important for like the Eurasian people, just because like, you know, living in high altitudes and being such a sturdy animal.
Yeah.
And they were a great food source for like textiles as well, and candles, making candles from their fat. So that's how. So they really use like the whole, you know, body of like, you know, the yak, which I think is pretty cool. But unfortunately, due to the permafrost thawing, the area is under threat of looting, because that's what happens. Suddenly, everything just kind of becomes there, and like you could see everything, and
the potential for treasure.
Yeah. And also the idea of finding Genghis Khan's tomb
is interested a lot of people for a long time.
100%. But it's actually really offensive to the Mongols, either due to the superstition or respect, obviously, for, you know, his last resting place, as he really, really didn't want it to be found. And that's kind of like this, you know, the story that's been going on forever, that like, you know, he never wanted his tomb to be found. And so he went through all these measures to like make sure that, you know, he was never
everyone
found.
who knew where it was killed.
Yeah, like that's the thing. And like in this really terrible show called Blood and Treasure, which is also the best, but it's really bad. It's really bad. It's so bad. I have to admit, I struggled to get through that second season. It was like, oh man,
It's so awful.
It's so awful. But and it's basically all about trying to find his tomb, or trying to find this particular, I don't know, artifact, basically about him. Anyway, so speaking of Mongolia, this kind of heads into like a perfect segue for another, like for a weird burial called sky burials. Have you heard of sky burials? This blew my mind. This was like the coolest, I think, burial practice, like ancient, actually, I think it still happens today, but it's been like a burial practice like forever. So sky burials are the funerary practice where a person's corpse is placed on a mountaintop to decompose while being exposed to the elements, particularly that of vultures, and I guess other scavengers as well. It is practiced in Tibet, Qinghai, I think it's Qinghai, sorry if that's wrong, Sichuan, Mongolia, Bhutan, and even parts of India. And seems to be associated with, oh my God, I'm going to get this really wrong. Sorry. Vajrayana Buddhism, which is another name of like esoteric Buddhism. So like this kind of like part of, which came about around the Tibet, Mongolia, India, and East Asia region within the medieval times. So it's been around for like
For ages.
For ages, yeah. Another similar practice is part of the Zoroastrian burial rites.
Zoroastrian.
Yeah, is that? I don't know. Which is essentially the same thing, except instead of placing the deceased body on a mountain, you place it on a stone structure called a dakma for vultures to pick at. And places for these burial rites are very rare these days due to religious marginalization, urbanization, and what I thought was really interesting, the decimation of the vulture population. I didn't know that was a thing, or that would actually affect any human practice. You know. So although it might sound really intense, like hectic, kind of gross way to be interred after death,
Kind of like
I
it.
kind of like it. It actually has a really lovely purpose. So a major part in the Vajrayana Buddhism is the teaching of the transmigration of spirits, where there is no need for a physical body or to preserve one's body after they have passed on, as it is now just an empty vessel. So essentially...
Why wouldn't you feed?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
essentially, like the act of placing one's empty vessel in nature for vultures to consume or for the elements to help decompose is thought of as like a really generous way to dispose of one's corpse because
Yeah.
you're giving it back to the environment.
Yeah.
And I kind of fucking love that.
Yeah.
I think that's so cute. So cute. I do kind of think it's cute.
I've seen, like, it doesn't just happen here, but they do it on the Great Barrier Reef, where you can have you get cremated and then you get put into a concrete kind of, not block, but like something that's for coral to grow on and then get put in the sea, which is a similar sort of,
Yeah, you're
like a modern version of giving back to
the environment.
nature.
Yeah. Yeah, I kind of really love that. Like,
Yeah.
you know, and also didn't realize that vultures were in a bad place.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that. Yeah, that's crazy. So yeah, also it should be noted the actual environment in which much of Tibet and areas of China are actually way too hard and rocky to even dig graves. So it's also like an environmental thing for them where they actually don't have places to like dig graves and they don't have like the soil kind of. So that coupled with this, and coupled with the scarcity of fuel and timber, sky burials were more practical than cremating or burying their dead.
Huh.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. So like instead of wasting your timber on cremating a body, which takes a long time, I
Yeah.
would assume, like, you just give them to the sky.
How interesting.
Yeah.
I like it.
I like it too. So another weird burial practice are called bed burials. Have you heard about these?
When you said you were doing it and I was looking up what I wanted to talk
Yeah.
about, I saw them and I was like, okay, I'm not going to look.
Never heard of them before.
Medieval women?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it popped up and I was like really confused. I'm like, bed burials, like what the fuck does that mean? So bed burials were a very unusual burial custom found across medieval mainland Europe generally, but they were also found in Egypt as well. So like Coptic Egypt, and were like a Christian burial rite for a period of time. Basically gaining traction in the 7th century AD, some Christians were basically buried in their beds, like fully in their bed. So they like, instead of being in a coffin, their bed is buried and they're put on their bed.
Like a hole is dug in the
Yeah.
ground and their bed is put in.
A bed, yeah. Yeah. Which again, I kind of like the idea of because I do love my bed. So like, it's kind of a nice, I don't know. So like, yeah, they were kind of laid to rest as if they were going to sleep, essentially. And
That's kind of sweet.
yeah, and so in England, only women have ever been found in bed burials. They think this is something to do with the women found in the England burials to actually be foreigners who came to England with the spread of Christianity. So they think that out of the bed burials from the women that they found in England, they may actually not actually be English, but have come from other parts of the country, either as like, with like traders or, traders from like, throughout Europe have come back to England and taken a wife somewhere else. And then they also think that these women must have had status as many people couldn't afford to have a proper bed. And also the poetic metaphor of the dead going into a long sleep, probably had something to do with it. I don't know. I think I'd like to go that way. But also a sky burial. I mean, I don't know.
I'm more interested in the sky.
Yeah. But yeah, really interesting. Only women have ever been found doing that. And they're not very common. So they're quite rare. And I just think that's like a really weird, random practice that I'd never heard of. In terms of earliest burials, we generally think of like Egyptian burials or old tombs found in like Mesopotamia.
Yeah.
But Neanderthals were also buried. And evidence of Neanderthal individuals as old as between 40 to 70,000 years old have been buried or potentially have been buried. And there are so many differing, I don't know, results when it comes to this. Like, you know, things get put out there and people hit back at it and go, no, that can't be true. I don't know. So I don't know. I kind of was reading a few different articles and I just kind of went between 40 and 70, depending on who you want to believe. Yeah, like, yeah. So in France, a 2-year-old Neanderthal baby was buried intentionally in a cave. In Iraq, at Sharinda Cave, 10 Neanderthal individuals were discovered, 4 of which were buried with pollen clumps around them, suggesting that flowers were laid.
Yeah.
With like as a funerary rite.
Yeah.
And I think that's really sweet.
Something that doesn't really get talked about when we talk about early human ancestors and all the various are they species.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
That a lot of what we find, we just find because of the circumstance in which they died in a bog or in a cave. And so they were preserved in some way, fossilized in some way, whatever.
Yeah.
And that Neanderthals were the earliest intentionally burying in a ritual. Archaeologists love the word ritual.
We love it. Everything is a ritual if we don't understand it.
Yeah. What's this? Oh, it's a ritual.
It's a ritual. What's a space? Oh, it was definitely used for ritual purposes. That's basically, when you say that, generally speaking, it's like, we don't know.
Yeah.
We have no fucking idea.
But they were buried intentionally.
They were buried intentionally, yeah. They weren't just kind of left. You know. But I love that idea of being buried with some flowers. And that, like, you know, also gives like a new topic, more of a topic on like, we think Homo sapiens, us, were like the only ones that were, I don't know, far enough in our evolution to be able to like do something like that. But then Neanderthals, you know, did too. Potentially, maybe. I don't know. These results are definitely contested but I also saw something, this is completely unrelated, but I guess it's kind of related, that Neanderthals also practiced cannibalism.
Oh.
Yeah, I didn't write anything more than that. But yeah, that was the thing, that there's evidence somehow that cannibals practice cannibalism. Neanderthals, practice cannibalism. Kind of cute.
Well.
And that's...
How cute is cannibalism?
I don't know. I don't know, cute for them. I don't know. Like, that's all I got for my weird burials. I did want to say, I also saw something. There's a lot being talked about Egypt at the moment.
Is there?
There is. There is so much in terms of like political stuff, which I don't think I really want to delve into right now.
No.
But there was a burial recently discovered. I think recently, I would say probably in the last 10 years or...
As we've said, it takes a long time for stuff to filter through to mainstream media.
Yeah, I think it was relatively recently, I think in the search for Cleopatra's tomb. And they found a burial with a golden tongue.
Oh.
And I kind of love that. Pretty
creepy.
Pretty creepy, pretty cool. Imagine being the person excavating
like the
that.
Whole it's not like a cap on the tongue.
No,
it's like...
It looks like a whole tongue. I'll put a photo up of what it's very... Yeah. It's a bit that. But I thought that was really like kind of a cool burial. Yeah. And that's all I got.
Awesome.
Yeah. Anyway, those are my weird burials.
Cute.
Cute.
All right. My turn.
Yes.
I have to read off the laptop. Sorry, I couldn't work out how to make the printer work. My job. So I wanted to talk a little bit about deviant burials, because that's what it's called in archaeology, where your face. Is it?
Is it? See, we all learned something here today. I swear I'm actually a good archaeologist, I swear.
Where certain individuals from a variety of cultures across different time periods and geographic locations are buried differently to everyone else in the society.
Because remember when we were talking, when we did the Belize episode?
Yes.
And they were like,
my
a deviant.
friend had sent me the thing.
And then we went through this, like, every possible scenario of what it meant. And apparently...
So that's just what it's called in archaeology.
Okay.
Which we never learnt about at school.
We never learnt about that at school,
and
thank
we
you very
haven't
much.
sort of come across it.
Well, we don't dig burials, so we wouldn't come across it.
Yeah. So they're identifiable in the archaeological record by their location, by the characteristics of the gravesite, or by the positioning of the body. And that Belize, that one, the Mayan one, was...
It was
I
a
think
weird
he
way.
was upside down and he was like missing a leg or something.
Yeah.
And he also had rocks put on top of him where the other ones next to him weren't buried like that.
Right. So it's just a burial that is like different to the burials around them.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Historically, archaeology hasn't paid much attention to deviant burials because they tend to involve criminals or peasants. And historically, archaeologists go after
True.
the treasure.
The gold and the fun things. Interesting.
Or like the elite burials, because that's what's the most interesting.
Yeah.
So it hasn't been something that we've really
That's sad.
delved into
As
recently.
as archaeologists in this day and age, you would hope that that's changed.
I think it's changed now.
Yeah. Let's hope,
Because, and I've written it here, like the focus of archaeology has kind of broadened, and it's not just about the elites anymore.
the fun ones. It's about everyone. Yeah. Have you also lost where you were at, like I did before?
And I also am not wearing my glasses, and I've tried to make the font really big on the computer, but I've made it too big.
Okay, yeah.
So
you get lost.
It's kind of hard to tell what's happening. But I think like a lot of the recent research has kind of established that deviant burials are not isolated. Like it's something that happened everywhere. How people dealt with criminals, peasants, people they thought were going to come back from the dead.
Like lowly
folklore stuff. Like it's kind of happened all over the world.
Yeah. Well, true. I mean, every society has had to deal with the same types of people.
Yeah.
You know?
And stuff like, I don't know, plagues and stuff where they thought stuff might come back. And keeping them in the ground was really important.
Yeah.
So one of the oldest examples, apologies for pronunciation, that's what we both always do every episode, Dolby Vestanice.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Where is this?
Czech Republic.
Cool.
Excavated in the 1980s. So this is one of the oldest examples that's ever been found of a deviant burial, because the burial was 27,000 years old.
Whoa.
In a Stone Age village, like fenced in by mammoth bones. Sounds really fun to excavate.
It sounds super fun to excavate.
3 young people were buried together. Their bodies were covered by burnt spruce logs and branches. A woman disfigured potentially from birth. I don't think they could tell if it was
Oh, okay, like you know, because usually you
a
can
natural
see.
from birth disfigurement or
Yeah,
if it's
okay.
something that happened early in her life.
Yeah.
She was in the middle. To her left, a man was laid prone, which means on his front. Most people are buried on their back or sitting upright. So he was on her left, on his front. And to her right, another man had his hands kind of angled onto her groin.
So strange.
Red ochre, which is a pigment used in many places in the world, here, and has a lot of ritual significance everywhere that it's used, was sprinkled on them. A thick wooden pole was driven through the third man's, his groin and thigh, pinning him to the ground.
What?
Quite rude.
So rude. Oh my God. This is like the strangest burial I think I've ever heard.
Yeah.
Like, so rude.
And that's all I wrote about that particular one.
Okay.
But that's 27,000 years old. That's a very old burial.
Yeah. How-
And there was no description of like actually what they found about it.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, did they have like any, you know?
I'm sure if it was dug in the 1980s, they have by now, but that's not where
We'll
my
just continue there.
writing went. In Eastern Europe, which is where Bram Stoker drew inspiration for Dracula, and we've talked about Vlad.
Yes.
There have been numerous discoveries of corpses that have been staked.
Yeah.
Bulgaria had many instances of roughly 700-year-old skeletons with blades that were used as plows thrust through their bodies into the ground.
Like to keep them down, like, you
Yeah.
know, in the event if they like reanimated
Yeah.
that they was,
That they were stuck there.
yeah. Don't love that for
that's-
them, but love that, but don't love that for them.
And that seems to be a really common one with like deviant burials is especially in that. Oh.
Love that.
Cool. So I've just spilled wine everywhere. If you're not watching and you're just listening, it's on me. It's also on the carpet.
It's fine.
It's fine. We'll deal with that in a second.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh God.
Yeah. Take three, right? Take three. Yeah. We're doing.
And this will be the one that will get put up.
This is definitely
which
happening.
We'll let you know how ridiculous the other ones were that didn't get put up.
Oh my God, they were so bad. They were so bad. It was just, yeah, sorry.
Fucking hell. Okay. Recent Polish excavations unearthed skeletons with sickles placed around their waists or necks, which I feel like we've talked about before.
It was
sickles around necks.
Yeah, it was the first episode. I think it was Cruel Rulers when we were talking about Vlad, and I think it was that. And then I mentioned something about like these bodies being as if like the sickles were placed there as if they weren't actually severing the neck, but they're
If they tried to get up,
Yeah.
that's what would happen. Other techniques such as stoning, weighing corpses down with heavy objects, which is like that one in Central America, have been found all over the world, from 4,000-year-old Bronze Age burials pinned down with huge rocks to even graves in ancient Greece weighed down with amphora that had been like broken up into little pieces and then like placed on top of burials.
I've read before that like one of the reasonings for this likely is because if you have like a burial that isn't very deep or hasn't been like packed down properly, this like bodies when they decompose, have so many gases build up. And so they actually
expand
and they can move. And so there was this like kind of reasoning going around that like, oh, maybe these bodies actually, moved, and they saw that as, oh my God,
it's coming back to life.
It's alive, But
that
really,
makes sense.
yeah, but really it's just, the natural process of the body, and also the way that it's been buried, that it's like the ability to kind of move around and stuff. And they're like, oh my God, it's coming back to life, but it's not. It's just,
to medieval English skeletons buried under grinding stones. The approach of ramming something firmly in a corpse's open jaw has been observed across millennia. For example, 8th century Irish zombie burials and the grave of the vampire of Venice, which we can put a picture up of, a 16th century skeleton disinterred from a plague cemetery, and it was a woman, and she had like a brick wedged in her mouth, like that. People from the past really took time to ensure that the dead wouldn't bother them again. Like,
that
I
they
feel like
stayed
that's
dead. Yeah.
a really common thing, whether it was a plague thing or a folklore thing about reanimation, or like people put effort into burials and making sure that people
they
stayed in the
down.
ground.
Like the fear that they would have had in order to obviously put so much effort in order to make that happen.
Yeah. And I read a thing that was talking about prone burials particularly, which my immediate thought would just be like, oh, like not looking at heaven.
Yeah,
or something.
yeah.
But there was something written about how maybe it was that if they reanimated, they were facing downwards. So if they were trying to do something,
it would go downwards.
They would go down instead of come up to the surface and come back.
That's really interesting, because I don't recall like seeing many burials facing down. Like that's not something that I've, you come across, doing research or whatever. You come across that much.
No, it's not common. And yeah, the last thing I wrote was just, it sort of brings up an idea of our own mortality, and like you can understand why it would ignite sort of fears about human mortality.
Yeah, 100%.
Dealing with dead people and how you choose to bury them.
Yeah. That's like so interesting. I didn't realize that's what deviant burials meant. But
I always just thought it meant people who were naughty, and that's
naughty
how they
people
were buried. But it actually is just burials that are different from everyone else in that timescape and landscape, and like why they might have been buried differently.
Yeah. And it's like, it's, out of like all the groups of people and cultures that we don't have any written sources for, or like any art from, to suggest any superstitions or like folklore or anything, this could kind of suggest that maybe they did have some superstitions, if they're, like, we know nothing about them, but we know that they were afraid of something. They were afraid of people coming back.
Yeah.
Or they could just be really bad people. And that was the way of...
That was a ritualistic punishment.
Yeah, punishment, in the dead.
In the afterlife.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So crazy.
So crazy.
So crazy. like the first burial, the one that you talked about.
I know. Why didn't I talk about that more? We'll never know.
We'll never know. You know what that reminded me of? I was trying to think of, because that was really reminding me of something of Game of Thrones. Have you ever watched, like, especially the first episode?
The first episode of the first season?
Yeah.
I have more than once, but I can't recall it right
like
now.
The very first like scenes of like, the the weird like the dismembering of the bodies and north of the wall or whatever, and it's like put in weird places and whatever, and it's supposed to, and it's like really creepy and whatever, and it kind of reminds me of that, like just a really like very kind of dark. I just get a lot of darkness from that, like
especially that burial was so old.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought I wrote more about it, so I apologize. Google is your friend.
Yeah.
If you want to know more.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, there's some weird ass burials out there. I do love like what they think are like vampire burials though. That
was very trendy for a time.
It was very. But yeah, especially
rest in peace to everyone who was murdered and buried because people thought they were vampires.
Yeah. Pretty horrific.
Yeah.
And just like interesting that a lot of them are found like in that geographical area, where Bram Stoker's Dracula, where Vlad was, you know. But yeah, they put so much time and effort because they actually thought these people were going to come back to life and
do something,
feed on them,
yeah,
and do crazy shit. Yeah.
So yeah, that's all I wrote.
Bit of a short episode.
Short and sweet.
Short and sweet. I'm just trying to think if there's any other like weird. I mean, there's so many. There's so many. There's so many weird burials.
We could do many episodes on weird burials.
I know that they did find in Egypt, they found a sarcophagus that had like, like there's basically they opened it up and it had basically was saying that if you open this sarcophagus up, like there's going to be a curse or whatever. Mm-hmm. But there was something really horrific had happened to that corpse, that it looked like that they had done it because they thought that this was going to come back or that it was like an evil person. I'll have to put it up. I'll have to find it.
Yeah.
But it gives me like the mummy vibes, like actually the mummy vibes. And I don't know if that was like that long ago. But yeah. And they were like, yeah, this person didn't have a good time. I think they were suggesting that the body had been buried alive.
Oh.
Yeah. And I think it had like ripped open. Yeah, horrific. But again, like the superstitions and like, crazy. Creepy.
Very creepy.
Yeah.
Well, I think we'll have to do another weird burials episode because there's so many to talk about.
There's so many. Yeah. Well,
okay. I think that's it for episode 10.
That's it.
Short and sweet.
Short and sweet.
Sorry it took us so goddamn long to get
know.
our shit together and get it to you. We are really sorry.
Yeah. We did try twice before this.
We tried twice before and life's gotten in the way as well, and all of a sudden it was like 2 months later. And
yeah. But we haven't stopped. We're back. It's fine.
it's happening.
It's happening.
Disappeared.
No. We're not one of those, that just does like 10 episodes and like stops. No, we're back. We're getting back into it. It's going to be fine. We're not one of those.
Not one of those.
Yeah.
All right. We will see you next time for episode 11. Don't forget to email us or comment if you have ideas for stuff that you want us to talk about, or if you are an archaeologist or a paleontologist or someone that does fieldwork somewhere and has a crazy story from your experiences. We can't talk about our own because we'll get in trouble.
Yeah.
But
and we can change names. We'll change everything.
Site names, all of it.
Yeah, even where you're digging. Like, we'll change everything. We just want to know, like, the core, crazy stories and interesting stories.
Because we know mischief happens.
Yeah, so much mischief happens.
Cool. So we will see you next time.
Yep.
See ya.